Welcome to Shareholders of a Better World, brought to you by TBLI Group. At TBLI Group, we have an established reputation as an organization dedicated to building the ecosystem of global sustainability and impact investing. We're doing this through educating, advising, and facilitating transactions in global sustainability and impact business, as well as capital solutions for private companies, family offices, and fund groups. For nearly 25 years, TBLI Group has created a vertically integrated ecosystem of education to action through TBLI conferences and TBLI consulting. More about our company can be found at tbligroup.com. This webinar is brought to you by TBLI Foundation, which hosts educational learning experiences dedicated to a better planet. Through the foundation, we build sustainable communities by sharing the people and the experiences making a difference to so many of our lives around the world. Our weekly podcasts bring impact thought leaders that are doing and not only chatting. Now let me introduce my guest today.
Good afternoon from our studio in Amsterdam. I'm really thrilled to have a very dear friend, Michael Madden, who's in my eyes is the rock star of investing in frontier markets. Before I introduce Michael, just some housekeeping explanation for those who've never joined us before. If you have a question, just type it at the bottom in the lower right-hand corner. If you want to clap or say something funny, there's 3 emojis that you can use. If you need to say hello to someone privately, just move your mouse over their name, and a window will open up, and you can send a private message. So our guest today is Michael Madden, who I've known for quite a while. He has an incredible career of going to places where most people don't want to bother. Too much hassle, too much trouble, too many problems. Ukraine, Russia, Mongolia, Myanmar, and successfully doing impact investing there, building economies in spite of all the challenges. So I'm going to let Michael introduce himself for those of you who are not familiar with him, and hopefully he'll be able to give us some insight as to what is it like actually working now in Myanmar. Michael, good morning to you.
Robert, good morning to you, and thank you very much. I suppose maybe stepping back, my first, I don't know if you still have me here, Robert, I've lost you on screen.
I just have my microphone was on mute. Can you see me?
Hello, Robert, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me? Yes, I can. Oh, I lost you. Okay. Michael will come right back. I think his Wi-Fi dropped, so he'll be back in a second. And if any of you have a specific burning question or that you want to grab the mic and actually join the podium. Okay, there you go. Michael, okay. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Robert. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, good. Anyway, probably just, starting off, my first entree into emerging economies, frontier markets, probably more emerging economies, was Russia in the early 90s. When I moved there with American Express after the collapse of the Soviet Union. And that really was my first experience of dealing in, an economy that was opening up. I spent a couple of years in St. Petersburg, a couple of years in Moscow. And I suppose when you're working for a multinational, you're sort of cocooned as such, you're not out there as the entrepreneur, you're working for that multinational, but you're dealing with the struggles and the nuances of working in an emerging economy. And it wasn't just Russia. It was, I was also touching on a number of the other countries that made up, the other 14 countries, not all of them, that made up the former Soviet Union. And thereafter, my next insight beyond the wonderful world of the former Soviet Union was when I worked in London, but I didn't do any work in London. I did work, but not focused on the UK. It's where I covered a portfolio of franchise markets for American Express, where they were selling their franchise or, converting smaller markets. And then that took me to places like South Africa, Croatia, Greece, Turkey, Norway, Denmark. So everything from an emerging market into a smaller market. And that was a fascinating learning experience. And as usually happens to me, I look at everything as a project. I got bored, and I had the opportunity to go back to Russia and maybe, leverage some of my know-how of Russia. CEO of Renaissance Credit. And that was a roller coaster ride in terms of setting up a bank from scratch in Russia in 2003, and thereafter setting up a bank in Ukraine. It was all about indirect lending, but you needed a banking license for that. But building a team, building the technology, building the infrastructure, it worked. It was great. I was there for 4 years. And thereafter, that's when I set up Ronoc and then said, okay, let me combine my operational know-how of operating in emerging economies and investing into emerging economies. I should qualify, Robert, I don't look for trouble. I'm looking for opportunity. I am looking to make $1. I'm looking to have fun while I do it, and I'm looking to do business with good people, but I'm not looking for trouble in terms of my selection of markets. So call it bad luck, good luck, whatever you want to call it. But I've been involved in Mongolia for a long time, and that's doing extremely well with a couple of situations there. Actually, Mongolia is a great example where you get involved in a business that starts from the ground, a microfinance business. It's called now called XacBank, where it's now scaled into one of the largest banking groups in Mongolia. And all going well. Hopefully this year we will have a listing of XacBank in the domestic market. And then Myanmar, and I suppose this is really what the discussion is about today. As I look at other markets and other opportunities, that was my next step was to move further east, and not just into Central Asia. Although I looked at Kyrgyzstan and did some stuff in Kyrgyzstan, it was to move into Southeast Asia. And again, my philosophy in terms of who we are as Ronoc and what we do, we're a small team. We've got what I call thin slices of capital, and that was the attraction in both in Mongolia and now in Myanmar when we first looked at it. Is going in with a small piece of capital, combining that with your operational know-how, and bringing in your own network to build a business and create value. The interesting thing, I suppose, about Myanmar is that we didn't find anything to invest into. So whether it was a wise decision or not, we still think it was the right decision. We started the business from scratch in Myanmar. And, to just give the backdrop in Myanmar, it wasn't flying in one day and away we go. We're going to get into business. The approach with Myanmar was a slow burn. So I had someone on the ground for a couple of years, and this was 2013 and 14. And basically it was one person who was producing a bi-weekly report on what was going. It allowed us to build up a relationships within the market and relationships outside the market. And of course, when you're producing a report, and we weren't providing really commentary, it was just circulating information that was going on in the markets. It really allowed us to build relationships with people in Myanmar and get a better understanding of the markets. And during that period, I made frequent visits to Yangon, more so Yangon, in terms of getting to understand the markets, the different groups. There was lots of opportunities to invest into a microfinance business. But, I recognized that having looked at microfinance businesses in other markets, I didn't think it was a business we could scale. There was challenges with getting capital into the country, capital out to the country. And my philosophy was let's build a business that we can provide a product and service to everyone. And that wouldn't limit us in terms of making a credit decision and serving a particular city or a different township in Myanmar. Let's build a business that can serve the entire market. And that's where we decided and had a plan to build a digital payments business in Myanmar. And it was absolutely, and still is today, all transaction driven. We don't do any lending. Whether we do that down the road, we're looking at different options. But today we have a very successful digital payments business in Myanmar. And I should say it's a B2B business, not a direct-to-consumer business. And, the reason for not going with a direct-to-consumer business is, I'm sure many of you know from the market you operate in, that where you are involved in digital payments, it's very difficult and very expensive to scale these businesses, and especially when you're educating a market or you're trying to move a market away from cash. As much as we think that this device is the best device, cash is still the most convenient for most people in let's call it a frontier economy, in my opinion. And there really needs to be a strong product proposition there for someone to say, I'm not using cash, I'm going to use a wallet in a smartphone. And the other point about Myanmar, we were probably lucky with our entry point into Myanmar, because at that time the mobile networks were opening up, and people were not using the old handsets. They actually transitioned straight on to smartphones, which really opened up the door for us to provide a wallet solution, which we have today. So we were fortunate with our timing, but we took advantage of that. And today we have, a little under 1.5 million customers on the B2B side. We service probably about 60% of the MFIs that are in Myanmar in terms of their loan repayments. And now we're doing loan distribution for a number of those microfinance players. We also work with the FMCG companies. So again, we provide digital cash to their end merchants. So when the Coca-Colas, the Heinekens, the Carlsbergs, Metros, I'm going to use in foreign names that you may know, when they deliver their product to that merchant pays with OnGo to receive that product from Coke or from soon to be Pepsi will have on board as well. So again, it is, I call it, it's similar to an indirect lending business. You're acquiring customers indirectly through a B2B, and then you work to monetize those customers directly over time. And that is our strategy in Myanmar. Challenges with Myanmar is things move slow. There are sanctions. There were sanctions. You need to be careful about who you do business with. I'm an Irishman. I have to stand by the European sanctions as an Irish citizen. I live in New York. I have to adhere to the US sanctions. So you need to be very careful not to trip yourself up in terms of who you're doing business with, who you're engaging with, and not alone you, but who your team are engaging with in the market. And in terms of how did we get going and how did we set up in Myanmar, I actually brought in some former colleagues, and it's not my success, it's the success of the team. So I had a good friend that I worked with in American Express, a guy called Alan Gilstrap. Alan came in as the CEO. Another good colleague from Ronoc, Peter Gall, he drove the business plan, the strategy behind it. The guy who put the boots on the ground the first time was a guy called Oliver Belfleet Nash. He was the trailblazer in terms of getting us into Myanmar and building up our relationships in Myanmar. And then we acquired the technology. We acquired the technology through a company that Alan Gilstrap was associated with, and we customized that technology for what we wanted to do in Myanmar. And I suppose, when you think about it, you think, well, you can buy the technology off the shelf. Well, not in a frontier country, because the level of customization, the amount of customization, the cost of the customization, there's no black boxes, as we all know in technology today. So we thought it was wise to actually own that technology. And yeah, maybe down the road, we'll sell that technology. It won't be as important when the market is settled. But we decided to own the technology so we could move in a faster way, or as they say in the industry, in an agile way, to come up with our different use cases and the adjustments that we wanted to make to serve our customers. And especially on the B2B side, you need to be very responsive. So that's all the nice story. We're in Myanmar, we assessed it, we got launched, and Ronoc, again, with our thin slice of capital, as I call it, we launched the business and built the business. And then after we did our initial launch, we brought in one other shareholder into our business, a great institution called National Bank of Canada out of Montreal. And people get surprised when I say NBC. But NBC are active, and their executives are active in Southeast Asia and Central Asia. They're very successful also in Mongolia, also in Cambodia, with one of the largest banks there. So NBC is our minority strategic shareholder in the business, and the rest is Ronoc and the team. But of course, the value in any frontier economy is the team on the ground, and the team you have around you, the team that you attract to build that business. And we are very fortunate to have a great local team and a great international team with experience. But as you all know from working in frontier markets, you bring the essence of how to build a business, but you need to understand how that market operates. So having local people and good senior local people is important to be able to run your sales efforts, your marketing efforts, and of course, they have the relationships in terms of how you're going to get into the different businesses to sell your proposition. We have an excellent COO and deputy CEO in Amy. So again, I talk about my team because, my team, our team, because without that team in terms of what we've built, and I'll talk, in a few minutes about what we're going through right now, it wouldn't be possible. Is everything okay? Everything is not okay. Before COVID hits, scaling these businesses, again, many of you know this, all of you know this, I know, is a challenge. And when you've got a digital payments where you're not actually getting any interest income, it's purely transaction driven. You need to hit scale at a fast pace. And Myanmar is a poor market, so the value of those transactions is quite low. So it takes time, and it takes time to scale that business. And we were on a great trajectory pre-COVID, like many other businesses, whether it be in Myanmar, other parts of Southeast Asia, or other parts of the world. We were on a very good trajectory in terms of scaling our business. But clearly then, yes, like the rest of the world, this pandemic struck us, and borders closed, and our ability to get into the country. But you learn a lot. In a crisis, you learn a lot. You learn a lot about your team. You learn a lot about the resilience of your team. And who can step up and who steps back, and whether you're in New York or you're in London or Amsterdam or in Yangon, same principles apply. And this is where the true leaders, as I say, stand up, and we saw that through the COVID period. And there's been a lot of chatter about the amount of digitization through the COVID period, that people moved to digital apps versus other means of payments. We didn't see that actually in Myanmar. Maybe it was because we're B2B, but we didn't see that. We didn't anticipate that. We didn't expect that. So our business fell off. I wouldn't say dramatically, but significantly it dropped off. And we regrouped. We were regrouping every day, but in terms of building our plan as things were easing because of the pandemic, at the end of last year, and we're already set to go, new year, 2021. And we started getting some of our old accounts back, and they were starting to do business again. Because I think if you're dealing with a Metro, and again, I'm using the foreign names that you will know, and Coca-Cola, if a restaurant is closed, they're not distributing, or a shop is closed through COVID, they don't have any product to sell or any product to distribute. So that is clearly has a direct impact on our business. But anyway, the fun was only beginning, of course, and I shouldn't say that lightly because it's not fun. It's serious. But in January, we're on a good trajectory. And Sunday night, and it was a Sunday, I will never forget it. It was Monday morning in Myanmar. 8:00 on Sunday night is when we had this terrible situation in Myanmar, in Naypyidaw, and then right through to the major cities across Myanmar. I mean, again, who could have expected that this would happen? Democracy, I believe, is built by giving people economic freedom, and the work that everyone does in going into a frontier country or an emerging economy. Once people have economic freedom, they have a voice. And I think what we've seen in Myanmar is people do have a voice. They have a very strong voice. So, they have enjoyed that period where there was a let's call it a managed democracy, not complete democracy, but it did allow people to grow. It did allow businesses to grow. It did provide for foreign direct investment coming into the country. It did allow for businesses like ours, and it's not called Ronoc, even though the legal entity is Ronoc, it's called Ongo in Myanmar, to establish itself. But yes, our world was shattered, and it's easy for me to say sitting in New York, but if you're a Burmese citizen, your world was truly shattered on the 1st of February when this coup happened. And it was a very difficult period. And I don't want to play it all back, but if you remember the first couple of weeks, there was a lot of demonstrations and there was a lot of activity, and it seemed to be all good and all very vocal. But of course, then after a period of 3 to 4 weeks, it did turn very, very violent. And that's when the situation for our business changed. It had changed on the 1st of February anyway. And, we had moved into a different modus operandi from the 1st of February, because at that point it was about the safety of our team. And it's not just our team, but we have 7,000 agents on the ground, our roaming agents. So, it was the safety of the entire team that we had in Myanmar. And again, and probably think from the middle of February, we had no access to our office. And again, leadership, I talk about leadership through the COVID period. This lady, Amy, who is our deputy CEO and COO, what she did and what she's doing, supported by our CEO, Alan, and our CFO, Peter Gall, is remarkable in terms of continuing to serve our customers, continuing to operate while trying to keep, it is a very delicate balance, because many businesses closed in Myanmar, many people stopped doing business, and that was a struggle. That was a struggle, as I discussed with my management team, in terms of, do we operate? Do we still, if we operate, are we showing support for one side versus the other? How do we balance this? How do we make sure that we kind of remain neutral so we can stay operating, or we'll just, suspend operations? But we never suspended operations. We continued to serve. And the modus operandi is that city safe? Is that township safe? And every morning, Amy and the team would rank those in terms of, again, red, yellow, and green, in terms of, can we operate in that township? I don't want to repeat what's going on. You've seen all the pictures. You've seen the news reports. It's disturbing to think that, I'm sure all of you agree, that this can happen in today's world, and that with very little intervention from anyone. I suppose that's the most disturbing thing. And yes, we did lose some of our team. We unfortunately lost 4 people who got caught up in different riots and different situations, and and we had many other incidents and situations. Again, the team on the ground recovered those people, got them out of prison, whatever. There's no right or wrong answer to this, but at the end of the day, you don't like to see people being shot, arrested, and again, I do need to be careful what I say, because the safety of my team in Myanmar is important, and I don't want to get into anything political here. My line on this is that we remain committed to our customers, our employees, and the country in Myanmar. And the important thing is that we want to make sure we keep our people employed. We want to keep them safe. But it is a whole other discussion in terms of politically what's going on in Myanmar. And I would prefer not to get into that, because it's sensitive. This is being recorded. I don't know who's on the line here. So I hope you do appreciate that. But I'd rather approach it maybe from a business standpoint in terms of some of the struggles. But it hasn't been easy. But in saying that, you'll all have heard that the banks closed. And because the banks closed and the banks were not transacting, it allowed us, and we weren't looking for the business actually came to us, take on new business in a very different way. So we're slowly building again. There's been a lull in the violence, but we're slowly building our business again. We have reset the business. There's no one being driven out there to hit a very high target. We've reset very low targets for the business in terms of where we need to be. But I would have to say over the last, couple of months, we're building up again. But building up again means what? There is still a lot of activity and explosions and arrests on the ground, and this could get all very violent again as I speak right now, and we may need to pull back and reconsider what we're doing in the market. So again, I didn't pick Myanmar to invest into, to put a significant amount of capital at risk. I picked Myanmar because I thought it was going to be a growing middle class, and it was going to be an economy with a population of 53, 54 million people, where we could get scale, we could create value, 20% or maybe a little over 20% of access to a bank account. I thought this is great, especially with with smartphones and the access to smartphones, the affordability of smartphones being anywhere from $15 to $20. I thought this is a great market in terms of financial inclusion, educating people on how to use finance, and then partnering up with the MFIs that we do there in the market. So I'll pause there, Robert, and maybe there's some questions that you want to ask me specifically, but the political side will cover a little bit, but I don't probably want to dig into that too much.
Okay, but so you've been operating there for several years, and the potential you clearly saw, and you're still committed to there despite the challenges going forward. Is it easy to communicate with your team? Because we hear social media is closed and telephones might not be working. Are you able to communicate with them on a regular basis?
Yeah, yes, we are fortunate that we can communicate. It doesn't work all the time, but there's two parts of that, Robert. Is number one is yes, and especially with the leadership of our business. I've got to know all the apps that I never used before, whether it be I've used Telegram and Viber and WhatsApp and Signal, back to texting. But what was happening in Myanmar, as you've all read, is the cellular networks were closed down. The data was closed down, the Wi-Fi was closed down. So you were picking those chat apps where you could get, and it took time for the authorities to shut a lot of those down and get a handle on all of those. But we always found a window to be able to communicate in maybe a certain period of the day, a certain time of the day, in terms of how we could get that communication going. But that communication daily was critical. It was daily communication, and probably a number of times a day. But it wasn't just the communications, and Robert, I mentioned this to you before or earlier this morning, is the power was shut down, purposely shut down, water was shut off, so there was a lot of other things going on, and people's homes were being attacked, and people had to move out of their homes and have moved to the countryside, so there's a lot going on, but it has. I won't say it has improved from what, but we're able to conduct some business. We had to get permission from the central bank. We are regulated, by the way. We had to get permission from the central bank for our app to continue operating. So, is that good? Is that bad? I don't know. But other than that, our app wouldn't work, and it really just worked. Of course, with an app, if you don't have the data working or the Wi-Fi working, your app isn't working. Now we have the ability to work offline with all those processes, procedures, but in terms of efficiency, you need to have it. So we have navigated that. It hurt us, but it didn't stop the daily communication flow that we had with our team on the ground. And the biggest cluster we've got is in Yangon and in Mandalay.
You're committed to Myanmar, because I know, knowing you, when you go, you think it through really carefully before you don't dive in head first and let's see what happens. So you looked at the risks, etc. And despite the challenges of the military at the moment, you're probably still committed. But what I discover with many institutional investors is that the minute that the going gets tough, they get going. They're not always there. Do you see that with other institutional investors in Myanmar?
From the MFI partners, and I don't want to speak for them, that we work with, and they're all the usual suspects, and some of the DFIs that are there with them. They have lending operations there, and I haven't heard through my discussions with many of them, and many of them are customers, that they're changing their minds. I think and then there's other big, oil and gas companies. You've got the Chevrons, the Trafiguras, who've got, serious amounts of investment on the ground. The challenge for them is, do they pull out and leave it all behind them? Do they pull out and then the country is, the country is starved? and fine, the military will be fine, but you need to think about the average man and woman on the street. And that's why in some cases sanctions work, but it's a tool of the past, in my opinion, sanctions, in terms of how they're used. They do work to a certain degree, but it really is a mechanism of the past. But it probably the big issue here, Robert, is the people who are about to commit, the people that are going to come into the market. That is just slowed the whole thing down. So, when is someone going to invest new capital into a country like Myanmar? Now, there will be people who will do it. I think more so from Southeast Asia and around that region. But I mean, in terms of foreign direct investment coming into the country and the uncertainty about the leadership of the country, that's the bigger issue. So any of the big projects, infrastructure projects, and other just strategic investors coming into the country, that has slowed the whole process down. And so in terms of economic growth, that's I mean, whether it's 3 years or 5 years, that's dramatically slowed things down. The only thing I would say is it is it's got natural resources. It won't be ignored. It's got a population of 53 million people. So like I say about all these countries, when they go through a tough time, they're not going away. They're still going to be there. So will they come back? Of course they'll come back. It's more a question of when will they come back. But in today's open world, I think that'll be a little bit quicker. So whether it's under a military-run government or a quasi-military / NLD government, I think the country will come back. And it probably is going to take another 2 to 3 years for things to settle before we see flows of foreign direct investment coming back into the country.
You mentioned that cash is an easy way of doing business, and people have. Well, I remember when we were there, we had these piles and piles, mountains of cash for a little bit of currency changes. How did you get people to go away from cash? You have 1.5 million customers. That's a lot.
But we didn't get those customers to go away from cash. As I said, our business model was B2B. Trying to convince a customer to go away from cash is an individual customer. I agree with you, it's a challenge. So what we did is we took it from a B2B standpoint. So we went to Coca-Cola, we did a deal with Coca-Cola, and then were all their delivery points, their merchants or retailers, whatever you want to call it, they became customers because Coke said, if you want to work with us, you need to work with OnGo, and that's how you're going to pay for your products when we deliver them. So again, I said we have our customer acquisition is indirect, not direct. We have some of it is direct, but we didn't plow marketing dollars above the line in terms of trying to get consumers. It just, I mean, if you have the money to do it, good luck, do it. It may work for you, but we don't have those pockets, and I think it would be a slow burn. But there's some very successful players. There's Wave, which is backed by Telenor. Was backed by Telenor and another group called Yoma Group in Myanmar, and they do a lot of the P2P payments, and they're very successful. And they built a great business. They are the leading player on the consumer side. We'll be the leading player on the B2B side. But again, I come back to the point: it's about getting scale. So we did not go direct to consumer, Robert. So we're not trying to. There's a motivation to use our service. So we are paid by the FMCG company. We're paid by the MFI company. Now those economics will switch in 2 to 3 years. So that's where we need to make sure we're monetizing those customers we're acquired. So are they using P2P? Are they using airtime? Are they using it for other services as well in the market?
Okay. I'm going to start taking a couple of the questions because there's quite a few. So Aaron wanted to know, are the country and political risk premiums created by Damodaran, I'm not familiar with them, from NYU, sufficient enough to base international financial models when trying to price international political and economic risk factors?
No, that's too technical for me, Robert. So I don't know if I can. I mean. Oh,
he gave a link to that. Okay, I'll try to come back to that afterward. Okay, Roberto.
Yeah, I mean, just in terms of doing it, our activity, as I said, is on the ground. We put boots on the ground for 2 years. That's how we did our research. This is not Excel sheet driven or other modeling. We put boots on the ground to understand what we could build and what we could create in the country. Understood the capital movements, tried to understand the banking system, and tried to understand, was there strategic value down the road? Would there be buyers for a business that we are creating down the road? But, I think some of the risk models you'd be changing on a continuous basis. You do need to look at them. Of course you need to look at them, but I don't think you need to look at one risk. You need to look at them with a combination of other factors.
Okay. Roberto Dovido, he had a question. Michael, you said earlier, who could have expected that this could happen? I'm in the communications business, and I've almost spent my entire career working in Asia, and I'm a political junkie. So over time, I've come to believe that in frontier and emerging markets, almost all risk is political risk. As you look at markets to enter and to invest in, and as you approach potential joint ventures, partners, investors, is this the main discussion point in your experience? Is investment risk considered as political risk, and do investors from outside the region see risk through that lens?
Yeah, no, I do agree. And it really is looking at how the political system is formed. And yes, there's what we had in Myanmar was a partial democracy, because at the end of the day, a big part of it was still controlled by the military. They never took their hands off the levers to pull. And then when you have no experience of running, it's great being in opposition, but when you're given them the keys of the car to drive it, you don't have that capacity or that administrative skill, to do it straight away. I remember one former British Prime Minister saying that, his name is Tony Blair, which you'll all know, and saying that, hey, yeah, I spent all my time and effort trying to get elected, and then the next day I was the Prime Minister. And I had to think, how am I going to do it? So, no, it is important in terms of consideration. The other thing you find as well is that the businesses usually get involved in politics because that's what you do. The son, the daughter, whatever, gets involved in politics. Less so maybe in Myanmar, but I've seen that in other countries. You see that in Russia. I see that big time in Mongolia. And it's more as a defensive tactic in terms of protecting your business. But then you get on with this retribution in terms of, well, this group is from this political party, and when this party is in, that it impacts here. But yes, you need to understand how the governance of the country, who's controlling what. And it's like most of these countries, you can think you know what's going on, but what really is going on, 30% of that, 40% of that, you will never know. You will never know what is actually going on in the country. But yeah, of course, it's got a huge influence. There's no dialogue. There's no dialogue in terms of what's going on in Myanmar in terms of who runs the country today. Is there dialogue in terms of what goes on in other emerging economies? Yes, but some of the biggest issues is businesses being entwined with politics. In many of these frontier countries, which makes it very, very difficult to do business because it depends which camp you're with.
When my wife was hired by the governor of the Karen state many years ago to try to build a hotel school, and she said to me, Myanmar is one of the most complicated countries with all of these different ethnic organizations and cultures. And then when she finally found the investment for the hotel school in the Karen state, then the Rohingya crisis came up, and all the investors said, oh, Rohingya, Karen, that's the same, so we're out of here. And that she found really challenging, that people from outside don't understand all of the different factions and organizations and cultures and there. Do you find that a challenge also, or?
No, it is. Robert, it is a challenge. I'm learning every day. Every day is a school day. If it's not a school day, then let's retire and hang the boots up. You're learning every day, and you have different factions, and you have distressing situations, whether it be the Rohingya situation, but to the east of the country as well, like Karen State and other places that are are autonomous and closer to China. And you'll find that you're using even the Chinese cell network, very porous borders as well. And, how much is controlled by Naypyidaw or controlled by Yangon. It's very complex, But you also have that in places in Russia where you have these autonomous places, South Ossetia, Abkhazia, Chechnya. Was the Kremlin really controlling what was going on there? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. But you have these conflict zones, autonomous zones. But the best way to providing you can get into business to help a country is to bring that knowledge and bring that capital in again to allow people to grow, to give them a voice. And yes, you need to go in a smart way and an informed way. Nobody wants to leave a business behind them. Nobody wants to lose money. And, I am in this, and I'm not ashamed to say this, we are in this to create value. But are we going to create value, trade in and trade out? No. If we wanted to do that, we would invest in a public instrument. This is a build. It takes time. You need to be resilient. Your team needs to be resilient. Your team needs to stick with you. And it's a journey. And but you learn when you're not from the country. You don't know the country. You're a visitor. You have to respect it, and you need to listen to your team on the ground to understand how to operate. And as I say, on Myanmar, I'm learning every day. I'm learning every day.
Beata wanted to know, what are the 3 key business lessons you've learned through your post-Soviet Union, UK, Africa, and current years as a leader, entrepreneur, and investor?
I think in terms of preparing to go into a market is how you prepare to go into a country, and it's continuous, but you need good preparation, research, but be in the country, research in the country in terms of, and that's more about who you're doing business with in terms of the research and what industry you're going to get into. Because when we looked at Myanmar, we looked at real estate, we looked at education, we looked at banking, we looked at microfinance. We just spread it wide in terms of where is the opportunity. Instead of saying we want to do this, we went wide and then came narrow. We came back to our knitting and what we know best, and stuck to our knitting as such, to what we know best. But I would say the research. The second piece is relationships. Form those relationships early, really early. Talk to people, don't read about it, spend time in the country, move to the country, live in the country, form those relationships, and get to talk to many people. So, there's many groups in Myanmar that helped us out. I mentioned Yoma Group, and the Pond family behind that have been a great supporter of ours. Even though they've got a competing business, it doesn't matter. The bigger picture is supporting businesses that are trying to grow. Melvin Pond has been a great supporter of of ours in terms of what we've been doing. And even in the last number of weeks when we're trying to get access to Yoma Bank, again, great with his team as well. So I think just having those relationships and forming those relationships early, because there's no point in ringing up someone when you're in trouble. Have those relationships so that if you do need to call on them, they know who you are. It's not a new discovery. And whether that be, one of the embassies that you work with, you pick up your knowledge about. So relationships are important. And then the third part is, what is your exit? How the hell are you going to get out of it? How are you going to monetize this? And there isn't an easy answer to this, but you do have to play it forward and not play it forward on a spreadsheet in terms of I can grow this and I'll get this and this is the return I'll get. It's more who's going to invest into your business or who's going to buy your business, in terms of trying to identify who those strategic investors are. And I've already, so from the first day when we set up, I started talking to who I thought could be the potential buyers of our business down the road. And a lot of them are sitting in Asia or Southeast Asia. So building a relationship from day one with your potential exit partners is probably the third thing that, and you may think it's a waste of time. I don't think it's a waste of time. I think it's important that you educate people about what you're doing, They get to see your staying power. They get to see what you're doing. They get to see your build. Whether they want to get involved in your business to invest it or buy it down the road, that's another thing. But I think it's time well spent.
Okay. Charles wanted to know about investment opportunities in Myanmar. What opportunities exist in today's situation? Are agriculture and other productive sectors also badly affected?
Well, the supply chain has been disrupted. The supply chain period has been disrupted in terms of transportation, although a lot of stuff comes by boat, but it has been impacted. Yes, there are. All these businesses need capital. We as Ronoc, Asia or Ongo were out raising capital. We started in January. I think I had 2 conversations in January, and we just shelved it thereafter. We'll go back to the market again, but we'll wait. We'll go back to the market again, probably later this year, probably towards the end of the year. But we'll see what happens. But there are sectors you can still invest in. The one sector I would probably stay away from is banking, because it's difficult. I always say with banking, and even though I'm involved in a bank in Mongolia, when it's good, it needs capital to grow. When it's going bad, it needs capital to support it. And I think some of the multiples are pretty much fixed in terms of the valuation of banks, and highly regulated, of course. But I think through the MFIs, whether you want to go in through a debt instrument or you want to go in terms of equity, there are investment opportunities there. And I think there's 1 or 2 public companies in Singapore holdings in Singapore, family holdings that have investments in Myanmar. It really depends on the sector, of course.
Okay. Derek wanted to know, do you see an opportunity for public-private initiatives to scale some of your projects over the medium to long term?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, one of the other reasons for us thinking through whether we should kind of like suspend operations or stay there, maybe it's not in the public-private, but we are talking to donors who need to distribute funds. We've got a network across the country. There's a lot more we can be doing even through this crisis. We're distributing 25 million for a group in the next couple of weeks. We need to be sensitive to make sure it's not political. It is true aid that's going to the right people, and of course we can validate that and vouch for that as well. So we are involved in some relief efforts, and we have discussions going. We've entered some discussions in terms of our ability to distribute relief in the country should different groups want to put it out. But in terms of public-private partnerships on a different scale, because this is just meeting the crisis right now. No, absolutely. One has to be open-minded about how you do it and how you build it. We do not have all the answers, and we're open to listen, open in terms of who we could do this with, whether it's dealing with something completely different. We have a lot of data. We have 7,000 agents. We're operating in all the major cities. We've got a great customer base. We own our technology. Our technology runs in the cloud. It's on like most businesses today. We don't have a blinking server in Yangon. It's all architected. Our technology team sit in Maryland, in the US. That's where our chief technology officer is. That's where it's all architected, and it runs in the cloud out of Singapore. So I think if we've got some breathing space, we'll look at what we can do potentially in some of the other clusters of markets as well with our technology in Southeast Asia. But open to any form of partnership, a public-private partnership right now with groups in Myanmar is probably a challenge.
How has Myanmar done with the whole COVID pandemic in Asia? Because you hear some incredible stories of some of the countries in Asia have done a phenomenal job in containing it and keeping the number of infections and deaths quite low. And then, India is now kind of off the charts. How did Myanmar do?
Myanmar was doing excellent, Robert,
really?
up to the 1st of February. And, in a socialist country, there's good order and people follow it, and it's policed well and it's run well. Our office was completely readjusted, inspected umpteen times. during 2020. And in terms of their tracing of people who were, near anyone who was contaminated, the COVID police, and they did have COVID police, insisted that you had to move to a certain location. They were doing an excellent job on it. Data, their reported cases were very low. But I don't know if any of our, I think one employee got COVID. That was it. So they were doing an excellent job. Honestly, I don't know what's going on right now. From the 1st of February, there's other priorities, and I don't know what's going on right now. Are we going to have another, did they do such a good job that it's contained? And remember, the borders are closed. You can leave, but getting into the country is a big challenge. So the borders are closed. So if they did a good job up to the 1st of February, they may be okay, or maybe they're not in certain parts of Myanmar. And hopefully, please God, we don't see the situation like they've got in India. And is that the next wave to hit Myanmar? I don't know. That does concern me.
Do they have a good healthcare system in Myanmar?
They have an okay healthcare system. I mean, the elite will go to Singapore for health services. They have an okay system, and a system that's changed probably in recent years, where it takes some money to get to the front of the line, as we see in many of these frontier countries that open up.
What can the audience that is listening live now, and those that will watch the replay, do to help you or Myanmar?
Hey, dude. Listen. At least take an interest in the country. If you're interested in investing in the country, I know, happy to point you in the right direction. If you're interested in the whole world of digital payments, happy to talk to you. But as I say to many people in other countries, investors, do you think there's a line of investors waiting at the border to invest into your country? No, they have other choices to make. They don't have to come to Myanmar. They don't have to go to Mongolia. They don't have to go to Russia. They can go elsewhere. You are not the last country in the world. It's not the last opportunity to make $1, create $1, or more value, whatever it is. So I think I would say, look to the medium to long term in Myanmar. You can get in there with a thin slice of capital, create tremendous value. We all look back and say in hindsight, if I only did that, if I only did that. Now maybe we say, if I only didn't do that as well. So let's balance it out. But if you've got the patience for the ups and downs, and the other thing I didn't talk about is the currency, because lots of people invest into emerging economies. The underlying business does great. And then the movement against the dollar or the euro kind of takes away the upside that we can all gain off the business. But I would say to anyone, is keep an open mind about Myanmar. What's happened is really bad. And think about a country like Thailand that is run by the military, and yet there's lots of businesses there. Does Myanmar go in that direction? I don't know, but Myanmar is not the first country to go back and to be controlled by the military, and it won't be the last either. Tell me where the perfect democracy or the perfect political situation is in today's world. Everyone's got a voice. Social media is powerful. News is, the quality of news today is concerning. So there's it's finding that balance. But the social balance, there's an imbalance in terms of the social balance in Myanmar today. So that's a problem. And how do you help the people? Get involved. Let's hire more people. Give them a job. And you can grow very successful businesses, as your wife did in building a hotel there, and a training hotel, and what a success. And I also think they're the standards, they're the corporate standards in terms of people that work in your business or leave your business. They see the standards and the norms that you work to, and I think they take those into other businesses. When I went to Russia in the early 90s, people that worked for me in 94 and 95, I hired them into my business in 2003 when I set up a bank. These countries are big, but they're small.
Ragnar had a question about what is the impact of COVID on microfinance institutions in terms of delinquencies or equity requirements?
I think the COVID situation was bad for them because, again, it's in microfinance, in terms of the end borrower, it's never usually an issue of them repaying and the trust of them repaying. But if they lose their job or their business has suffered, it's an issue. I don't want to speak about any particular microfinance company, but some of the major ones are having big problems in Myanmar. And while they were managing through the COVID period, clearly, what's happened since the coup on the 1st of February has exacerbated that for them. And you have all the usual suspects in the MFI world there, and of course it's hurting them. But what do they do? Pack up and leave, or maybe slow down their loan origination, which they have done anyway by default, and then work on the recovery and the build up again of their loan books. But clearly, it's had a dramatic effect.
Roberto wanted to kind of clarify that for you, the focus is preserve as much value as possible, protect your employees as much as possible, but wait out the political and public health issues and play the medium long-term game to kind of get through this difficult period. Absolutely,
100%. That's what we're doing. Our business is growing month on month. I usually I'd be shouting loud about that, but I want to just stay measured about it because it's a very difficult situation. But our business is and the outlook for our business with some new business we've signed over the next 2 to 3 months is looking good. But we have reset our business to a lower level in terms of operational costs and the support we have around it. But we're not. I mean, it's disruption, but you build a lot of loyalty with your customers. You build a lot of loyalty with your employees through this period. You learn through this period, and we've a lot of great leaders in our business in Myanmar, and no foreigner could have done this. I mean, they're all local people. Our CEO Alan is foreign, and Alan unfortunately he left the country because of COVID. Couldn't get back into the country, and clearly can't get back into the country now because of the military coup. So we have our challenges, but as we've all learned to adjust, whether it's using video or using different chat apps, it doesn't stop the way we're operating. We remain committed to our team. We remain committed to our customers in that order, and we remain committed to the country. So yes, we will continue to operate unless someone says, shut down your operation, you have to leave. And clearly we have to, we can't retaliate. We have to obey if we get those instructions. So far, so good.
So there are no sanctions for what you're doing in Myanmar?
We have to be careful in terms of who we do business with, but there are no sanctions in terms of the types of operations that we do. But there are sanctions against people. We have the OFAC list in our database, the European list in our database. So we have to be very careful about the groups and the individuals that we do business with.
Okay. We're coming down to the end of the hour. I would like to take a group selfie with everyone. I want to thank you very, very much for giving us your time. I really appreciate it. I will send out a replay link to everyone who signed up, so they can watch it again or the first time. And if you want to share anything that you want me to distribute with any of the people who signed up, happy to add that to the mailing, which it usually takes about an hour for this to be processed. So let's just take a quick group selfie to prove to your wife that you were actually working today. And just take a photo of yourself. And I want to thank you again, Michael, because this has been really spectacular. I can imagine how challenging it is to work on this. I want to thank my entire team for helping make this happen, the whole production crew, Sam, our producer, crypto genius and ramen critic, Ricky, my absolute better half with no filter, Xi Jinping, head of transparency and integrity, Myanmar generals, our power sharing advisors, Vladimir Putin, our head of conflict resolution, Jeff Bezos, our human resources and full text compliance leader, Marjorie Taylor Greene, our astronomer specializing in Jewish leaders, and Elon Musk, our humility coach. So thank you all very, very much. And thank you, Michael, again for doing this. I'm very grateful.
Robert, thank you, and thank you for very much for everything that you do as well, and giving me the opportunity to speak today. But thank you for everything that you do in promoting the investors and in promoting in terms of the opportunities in some of these more difficult regions. So thank you very much, Robert.
My pleasure. You stay well. You stay well. We had actually a couple of investors who invested in Myanmar attending, so I'll double back with them to see what was their impression.
All right, good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Yes. Okay.